These are the real facts about what happened to Australian actor Heath Ledger, whose death at 28 shocked the world and spawned countless myths that still persist today. On January 22, 2008, the rising star who had just delivered one of cinema's most iconic performances as the Joker was found dead in his Manhattan apartment. And the truth behind his passing is both simpler and more complex than the headlines suggested. Heath Ledger was born in Perth, Western Australia on April 4, 1979, to Sally, a French teacher, and Kim, a mining engineer and amateur race car driver. From an early age, he stood out for his restless curiosity and creative drive. At just 10 years old, he played Peter Pan in a school production at Guildford Grammar, already showing a taste for performance that went beyond the ordinary. After his parents' divorce, he threw himself into chess, even winning the Western Australia Junior Championship, but it was acting that pulled him forward. By 13 years old, he was landing roles on Australian television, making his debut in 1992. The hunger for something bigger sent him across the country to Sydney at 16 years old, chasing auditions and bit parts. That bold move paid off in 1999 when he broke through internationally with the teen romantic comedy 10 Things I Hate About You. Suddenly, the kid from Perth was a global star. His ambition propelled him far from home and into the bright, demanding world of Hollywood. Critical acclaim arrived with Brokeback Mountain in 2005, but the demands of serious roles began to weigh heavily. Behind the scenes, Heath Ledger's personal life grew more complicated. He and Michelle Williams welcomed their daughter Matilda in 2005. But the pressures of work and constant travel strained their relationship. Friends and colleagues noticed a growing restlessness. Ledger struggled to sleep, often describing nights spent wide awake, his mind racing. By 2007, insomnia had become a constant companion, with reports that he sometimes managed only a couple of hours of rest each night. The emotional toll deepened after his separation from Williams in September 2007. Those close to him saw the shift. Ledger was battling exhaustion and heartbreak, searching for relief. These vulnerabilities set the stage for the choices he made in his final months, long before any talk of the Joker's shadow entered the picture. London, late 2006. Heath Ledger checked into a hotel room with a suitcase, a handful of comic books, and a blank journal. For nearly 6 weeks, he barely left that room. The purpose was simple but intense: to disappear into the mind of the Joker. Ledger filled the journal with sketches, lines of dialogue, and unsettling ideas, anything that might help him understand the character's chaos. On the last page, he scrawled 2 words: bye, bye. The diary was not a cry for help or a warning. It was a tool, part of the meticulous way he prepared for every role. Ledger's isolation in London was not about losing himself. It was about building something new, piece by piece. Colleagues would later describe the process as immersive, not destructive. The evidence sits in those pages, a record of creativity, not collapse. Ledger's hotel stay lasted nearly a month and a half, long enough to emerge with a new voice, a new laugh, and a performance that would change his career. The journal remains one of the most concrete artifacts from that period, offering a glimpse into the method, not the myth. Rumors spread quickly after Heath Ledger's death, with headlines insisting his immersion in the Joker role had left him broken. But those who worked closest with him told a different story. One grounded in daily experience, not myth. John Calleone Jr., the makeup artist on The Dark Knight, remembered Ledger's warmth on set. In a 2008 interview, Calleone recalled that Heath would finish a scene, rip off the Joker mask, and give everyone a bear hug. He was full of life, not haunted. Christian Bale, who shared the screen with Ledger, dismissed the idea that the role consumed him. In July 2008, Bale told reporters that Heath said playing the Joker was the most fun he had ever had on a film. Director Terry Gilliam, who worked with Ledger on the Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus, was even blunter. In early 2009, Gilliam called the Joker madness myth absolute nonsense and described Ledger as the least neurotic actor he had ever met. These voices, drawn from the people who saw Ledger at work, point to a reality far removed from the tragic legend. Their testimony clears the way for the real explanation, one rooted not in fantasy, but in the facts of medicine and circumstance. The official autopsy released by the New York City Medical Examiner's Office delivered a clear and clinical explanation. Heath Ledger died from acute intoxication by the combined effects of 6 prescription medications. The report named them oxycodone, hydrocodone, diazepam, temazepam, alprazolam, and doxylamine. Each of these drugs, on its own, can be found in medicine cabinets across the world. Oxycodone and hydrocodone are strong painkillers. Diazepam, better known as Valium, and alprazolam, known as Xanax, are prescribed for anxiety. Temazepam is a sleep aid, and doxylamine is an over-the-counter antihistamine often used for insomnia. None were present in amounts considered an overdose. The problem was the combination, a phenomenon doctors call polypharmacy. The medical examiner's summary left no room for myth. It said that it was the combination of the drugs that caused the problem, not necessarily too much of any particular drug, and that all these drugs have a cumulative effect on the body. In plain terms, these substances all depress the central nervous system. When taken together, they can slow breathing and heart rate to a dangerous degree. The risk multiplies with each added sedative, making the body's signals weaker and weaker until the brain can no longer keep the heart and lungs working. This is called central nervous system depression. Ledger's death was ruled accidental. There was no evidence of intent, no suicide note, and no single drug at a lethal dose. The science points to a fatal synergy. The drugs, in therapeutic amounts, interacted in a way that quietly shut down his body during sleep. The tragedy is not about a single reckless act or a tortured artist myth. It is about the silent danger of mixing medications, especially in someone desperate for rest. The facts of the autopsy reveal a reality more human and preventable than any Hollywood legend. At 12:30 p.m. on January 22, 2008, Heath Ledger's housekeeper, Teresa Solomon, entered his Soho apartment. She found the space quiet, Ledger resting face down in his bedroom. By 1 p.m., she noticed the sound of snoring from his room, a detail she later shared with investigators. Everything appeared normal, and she continued her routine. At 2:45 p.m., Diana Wolozin, Ledger's masseuse, arrived for a scheduled appointment. She let herself in and called up to his room but received no answer. When she entered, she found him still in bed, unresponsive. Wolozin tried to wake him, shaking his shoulder and calling his name. There was no response. Instead of calling emergency services first, Wolozin reached out to Mary Kate Olsen, whose contact information she found among Ledger's belongings. Olsen, in California at the time, promised to send private security to the apartment. Minutes ticked by. At 3:31 p.m., Wolozin finally dialed 911 and reported that Ledger was not breathing. Paramedics arrived within 2 minutes and began CPR, but their efforts failed. At 3:36 p.m., Heath Ledger was pronounced dead at the scene. The official investigation began immediately. NYPD detectives interviewed Solomon, Wolozin, and others who had seen Ledger in the days prior. The Drug Enforcement Administration opened a review of how Ledger obtained his medications, scrutinizing doctors and pharmacies in both the United States and Australia. Investigators found no evidence of illegal prescriptions or criminal intent. Mary Kate Olsen cooperated with federal authorities after receiving immunity, but nothing linked her or anyone else to wrongdoing. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office concluded there was no viable target for prosecution. The case was closed. Every step in the timeline, the housekeeper's arrival, the masseuse's discovery, the 911 call, and the rapid police and medical response fits together with the medical examiner's findings. No sign of foul play, no evidence of suicide, and no criminal charges. The facts point to a human tragedy rooted in circumstances, not conspiracy or myth. The enduring myth overshadows the real loss, a young father fighting sleeplessness, undone by a fatal mix of prescribed drugs, not by his art. Today, prescription drug interactions claim over 16,000 American lives each year. The true tragedy is preventable and still unfolding. Let's not look away.